The child outside my ranger station laughed exactly like the girl I failed to find 3 winters ago. I knew it before I crossed the room, before I reached the peephole, before my hand touched the chain lock. I knew it the way you know a song from 4 notes, not because you remember choosing to memorize it, but because some part of you kept it without permission. I pressed my eye to the glass anyway. She was standing on the porch boards in bare feet, wearing a red wool coat with 3 brass buttons down the front, just like the one described in the missing person report. Lena Ward, 8 years old, last seen on the Mercer Creek Trail, 30 miles south of Blackpine Ridge during a February snowstorm 3 years ago. She was standing 12 inches from my door. Her head was turned slightly to the right, toward the tree line. I couldn't see her face. Then she laughed again. That same bright, impossible sound. Too light for the cold. Too young for the dark. And I felt my hand move toward the door handle before the rest of me caught up. I stopped. Not because I was smart. Not because I was brave. I stopped because I had read the binder that afternoon, and the first rule was still sitting in the front of my mind like a splinter that had not worked itself out yet. After midnight, do not open the door for a child's voice. I didn't open the door that first time, but I did something worse. I listened. My name is Ethan Vale. I had been at Blackpine Ridge Ranger Station for 11 hours when the laughing started, and by the time morning came, I understood that some doors don't need hinges. Some doors are made of guilt. Some are made of memory. And some doors open the moment you hear the right voice and want badly enough for it to be real. I drove in on a Thursday afternoon. The service road up to Blackpine had been plowed once that week and was already filling back in. 4 or 5 inches of new snow sat over packed ice, and the truck slid at every second curve. I kept both hands tight on the wheel. The radio worked for the first half hour, then gave me weather chatter from the lower district, then static, then nothing. After that, there was only the sound of the engine, the tires breaking crusted snow, and the thick forest closing in on both sides of the road. Blackpine Ridge Station sits at the end of a half-mile spur off the main access road, carved into the Cascade Forest sometime in the 1960s. The trees come right to the edge of the clearing. Not like a normal tree line. Not open. Not breathable. A wall of fir and cedar, old growth where the slope gets steep, with smaller black branches knitted together underneath so tightly that even in daylight you can't see more than 10 feet in. In summer, it might have looked remote but manageable. In February, with the afternoon light already draining from the sky, it looked like someone had built a matchbox in the middle of a basement. The station itself was simple. Main room, back sleeping room, storage bay, a wood stove in the main room, a cot in the back, a service window facing the access road, a porch wrapping around the front and east side, a generator shed bolted to the rear wall. No running water in winter. You melt snow or use the 5-gallon jugs stocked in the storage bay. Radio unit on the main desk. Trail maps on the wall. Plastic binders above the radio. Yellowed old ones on the left. Newer orange ones on the right. Standard winter outpost. I had read the job description 6 times. I was a seasonal hire, still technically in probation. Before that, I had 2 years as a search and rescue volunteer, 1 summer as a trail patrol ranger in another district, and enough emergency training to know how to stay useful when a situation starts trying to make you emotional. That training matters. It teaches you to work the checklist. It teaches you to slow down. It teaches you not to chase every sound in the woods just because your heart tells you to. That last part is important. 3 winters before Blackpine, an 8-year-old girl named Lena Ward disappeared during a snowstorm on the Mercer Creek Trail. I was part of the volunteer search team. I heard a child laughing in the trees that night. I did not follow it. Lena was never found. There are facts that sit quietly in your life. Then there are facts that become furniture. You learn to move around them every day. You learn where the corners are. You stop bruising yourself against them in public. But they remain exactly where they are. Lena Ward was one of those facts for me. I didn't take the Blackpine posting to punish myself. At least, that's what I told people. I said I wanted winter experience. I said I wanted quiet. I said it was a good opportunity for a seasonal ranger trying to prove himself. All of that was true enough to pass as the whole truth. The previous ranger had resigned in October, mid-season. That was unusual. My district supervisor, Marin Harlow, had not been specific about why. She told me his name was Gold. She said isolation had not been suited to his temperament. She said it the way people say things when they mean something else and are hoping you won't press. I didn't press. I needed the posting. I needed somewhere empty enough that I could breathe without seeing Lena's red coat in every crowd. I parked in front of the station just after 3 in the afternoon. The generator was already running, which meant someone had come up before me and started it. The radio showed a weak but usable signal. The wood stove was clean and laid with kindling. The water jugs were full. The food stores looked untouched. Canned goods, dried meals, coffee, powdered milk. Enough for 60 days if stretched. Though my post was scheduled for 30 with a resupply halfway through, everything was in order. Too much in order. Remote stations are never really clean. They accumulate evidence of whoever was there before. A pencil behind the stove. A coffee ring on the desk. A torn glove near the generator. A name scratched lightly into a shelf. But Blackpine looked wiped, not cleaned. Wiped. As if somebody had removed one life from it and left the building behind. I ran the intake checklist anyway. Generator output. Fuel level. Radio test. Stove draft. Window seals. Medical kit. Flare box. Trail closure logs. I initialed each box, filled in the date, and tried not to think about the previous ranger driving down the mountain in October with half his post unfinished. Then I found the binder. It sat on the shelf above the radio, but not in sequence with the others. Someone had placed it at the far right newest position, even though the binder itself was old. Black cover. Soft spine. Edges bowed from moisture and handling. No official label. Just 2 words and permanent marker. Station. Protocols? I almost didn't open it. It looked like standard operating procedure, and I had already read the district materials. But the binder looked too handled to ignore. I pulled it down, set it on the desk, and opened it. The first page was handwritten. Not printed. Not typed. The letters were neat, but pressed hard into the paper. These protocols are specific to Blackpine Ridge Station and do not appear in district materials. Read them anyway. I turned the page. There were 4 rules. Underlined. Each one written with the same deliberate pressure. Rule 1. After midnight, do not open the door for a child's voice. Rule 2. If the child laughs, stop listening. If the child cries, stop remembering. Rule 3. If you see small footprints on the porch, check whether they face the door or the woods. Rule 4. If you open the door, do not speak your name. I sat with those lines for a while. My first response was practical. Every remote post has local folklore. Every station staffed by enough people over enough years accumulates unofficial knowledge. Some of it is useful. Some of it is superstition. Some of it is just hazing. I had heard stories from trail crews about campsites you don't sleep in, old bridges you don't cross after dark, sections of forest where everyone lowers their voice without knowing why. None of it was official. All of it was part of the culture, so I told myself this was that. Someone had written a spooky rule list to scare the incoming seasonal ranger. I set the binder aside. Then I saw the envelope. It was taped under the radio desk, tucked far enough back that I only noticed it because one corner had curled loose. My name was written across it. Atian Valen. Inside was a folded note from Harlow. Vale. If you found the black binder, keep it on the desk after sunset. Do not remove pages. Do not add anything unless you survive something the binder failed to explain. If a rule seems irrational, assume you do not yet understand the condition it was written for. Do not improvise. M. Harlow. I read the last line twice. Do not improvise. Not be careful. Not call if there's a problem. Do not improvise. I folded the note and slid it back into the envelope. At 4:10, I went outside for the evening perimeter check. The porch light buzzed faintly, washing the boards in pale yellow. Snow fell in thin, dry needles. The clearing was quiet in that heavy winter way where sound seems to stop a few feet from its source. That was when I saw the footprints. Small ones, child-sized, bare feet. 6 prints leading from the bottom step to the front door. No shoe tread, no boot marks. Toe impressions clear enough that I could see the curve of each small foot. I crouched beside them. They faced the door. The rule came back before I could stop it. If you see small footprints on the porch, check whether they face the door or the woods. I looked toward the tree line. Nothing moved. No sound, no birds, no branches shifting. Just the dark forest and the steady fall of snow. I told myself it was an animal. Some small animal had crossed the porch and left strange impressions. Snow distorts prints. Melt changes shape. The brain completes patterns. I stood, went back inside, and locked the door behind me. Then I finished the intake checklist without looking at the porch again. Radio contact was scheduled at 1800. It came through on time. The dispatcher was a man named Ortega. I had spoken to him once during orientation. His voice had that calm, efficient texture people get when they spend their whole workday talking into a box. Blackpine Ridge, District Dispatch, confirm station status. I picked up the transmitter. Blackpine Ridge checking in. Ranger Vale on site. Generator running, radio usable, fuel and supplies confirmed. Copy that, Vale. Weather system is moving faster than expected. Heavy snow overnight. Access road likely closed by morning. Understood. There was a short pause. Then Ortega asked, "You found the station binder?" I looked at it on the desk. Yes. The handwritten one? Yes. Another pause. This one was longer. Follow it, he said. I waited for him to add something. He didn't. Can I ask why those protocols aren't in the official district material? 2 seconds of static. Then Ortega said, because they're not the kind of thing that looks good in a district file. He signed off before I could ask anything else. For a long time, I sat at the desk, staring at the binder. The station creaked around me. The stove popped. The generator hummed behind the building. Outside, the light drained from the clearing until the service window reflected only the inside of the room back at me. My own face. The desk. The wall map. The black binder. At 7 hours, I made the first log entry. 1900 hours. Heavy snow. Visibility poor. Station secure. No trail activity. I almost wrote about the footprints. I didn't. There is a moment in every strange situation where you decide whether to make it official. Once you put something in a log, you give it weight. You give it a place in the world. I was not ready to do that. At 8:30, I made coffee. At 9:00, I checked the generator. At 9:43, I heard the laugh. It came from outside, not far away in the trees, not down the trail. Outside the station, near the front porch. A child laughing softly, like she was hiding and trying not to be caught. I froze with one hand on the coffee mug. The laugh lasted maybe 3 seconds, then stopped. I checked the clock. 9:43 p.m. Not midnight. The rule said after midnight, that mattered. I wanted it to matter. I went to the service window and looked out. The porch light was still on, buzzing in its yellow circle. The access road was empty. Snow fell steadily through the light. I could not see the entire porch from that angle. The laughing did not come again. I stood there for 5 minutes. Nothing. I returned to the desk. At 10:17, a child's voice came through the exterior wall, very close to the front door. "Hello?" Is someone in there? Small voice, young. Maybe 8, maybe 9. Polite in the practiced way children are when they have been taught to ask adults for help. I'm really cold, the voice said. Can you help me? I was already standing. That is the thing about this kind of fear. It doesn't begin as fear. It begins as duty. Child outside. Below zero. No shelter. You move before thought catches up. I made it to within 2 feet of the door. Then the voice said, I got turned around on the Mercer Creek Trail. I stopped. The stove popped behind me. The generator hummed. The room seemed to lengthen between one breath and the next. Mercer Creek, 30 miles south. The trail where Lena Ward disappeared. The voice was silent for a moment. Then it said, I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. My fingers went numb. Not from cold, from recognition. 3 years ago, after the search ended, I had written one sentence in a private SAR notebook. Not in the official report. Not in any interview. Not anyone could have read. I wrote, I heard her and chose the map instead. The voice outside the door whispered, You heard me and chose the map instead. I backed away from the door. My heel hit the desk. I sat down hard. I did not answer. I did not open the door. The voice waited. Not like a child waiting. Like something listening to see what that sentence had done inside me. Then it laughed once, farther away, and went silent. I sat at the desk until the clock turned 11,000. After that, I opened the binder again. Past the 4 rules, the pages became a mix of maintenance notes, radio frequencies, trail closure updates, and handwritten journal entries. The entries near the back belonged to Gold. At least, I assumed they did. His handwriting was careful at first, then less even, then careful again in a different way. Not calm careful, controlled careful. The kind of handwriting produced by someone forcing his hand to behave because everything else has stopped obeying. One entry read, The first sound came before midnight. I thought that meant the rule did not apply yet. I was wrong. Before midnight is when it studies. After midnight is when it asks. Another. It mentioned the blue mug on the shelf. It knew the generator was running rough on the second cylinder. It knew I had not slept. These are specific things. Either something is watching through the windows or something is learning what attention gives it. Another, Rule 2, is not about emotion. It is about cognition. Laughing makes you listen. Crying makes you supply the missing details yourself. I turned the page. There was a folded sheet tucked inside. A note in Galt's handwriting said, Audio log found in lower drawer. Do not play after midnight unless already engaged. I looked at the clock. 11:28. Not midnight. I should have left it alone. Instead, I opened the lower desk drawer. Inside were spare batteries, old pencils, 2 road flare caps, a cracked compass, and a small handheld digital recorder with a strip of masking tape across it. Written on the tape, Galt, Night 11. I pressed play. For 3 seconds, there was only static. Then a man breathing too close to the microphone. Blackpine personal log, he said. Ranger Daniel Galt. I don't know the date. I think it's the 11th night. A thump sounded in the recording. Far away. Or maybe inside the room where he had recorded it. Galt continued. If you're hearing her laugh before midnight, she is still learning you. His voice trembled, but he kept it low. If she cries after midnight, she has already found the door you left open. Another thump. Closer. Galt inhaled sharply. I need to be clear. The door is not just the front door. That is what I misunderstood. A door can be a name, a memory, a question you want answered, a guilt you keep unlocked because you think locking it would mean you stopped caring. Something scraped in the background. Long and slow. Gald whispered. It does not want your body first. It wants permission. Your voice is easier to use if you give it willingly. Then a child laughed in the recording, so close to the microphone that Galt stopped breathing. A little girl's voice said, Daniel? The recording clicked off. I sat completely still. The room around me seemed louder after that. Stove. Generator. Wind pressing snow against the siding. My own breath. I looked at the service window. In the glass reflection, behind me, for 1 second, there was a small shape standing near the back room door. Red coat, bare feet. I turned so fast my chair hit the floor. Nothing. The back room doorway was empty. I stood there with one hand on the desk, listening. Then the radio clicked on. Static. A burst of tone. Ben Ortega's voice. Blackpine Ridge, District Dispatch. Radio check. I reached for the transmitter, relieved so suddenly that I nearly answered too fast. Then he said, "Please confirm, Ranger Ethan Vale." I stopped. Ortega did not use full names. He had called me Vale, only Vale. The radio hissed, "Please confirm your full name for station record." I removed my hand from the transmitter. The radio clicked off. At 11:42, I checked the porch again. The footprints were still there. But there were more now. Not just the 6 leading to the door. Small bare prints circled near the east side of the porch. Others ran along the wall beneath the service window, back and forth, as if something had paced there without making a sound. All of them faced the door. I went back to the binder. My hands were shaking, so I opened the field guide from the shelf above the radio and placed it beside me. It was an old Pacific Northwest plant guide. Someone had bookmarked a page about lichen. Actual photographs. Actual labels. Real things. I didn't understand why the bookmark mattered until later. At 11,055, the laughter came back. This time it was directly outside the door. Closer than before. Too close. It had the same shape as the laugh from Mercer Creek, the same little lift at the end, the same impossible brightness. I checked the clock. 11:56. The laugh came again. Then a voice. "I knew you were here," it said. I did not move. I saw your light under the door. The clock ticked. 11:05. The voice spoke again. "I waited for you last time." My hands flattened against the desk. 11:588. I was right under the pine roots. That detail existed in the report. Lena's coat had been recovered under a root ball. That could be known. That could be learned from paper. But the next thing could not. "You wrote it down," the voice whispered. "You heard me and chose the map instead." 11:59. The room seemed to shrink around the stove. The door looked too close. The handle looked too easy. At 12, the laughing stopped. At 12:01, the crying began. Rule 2. If the child laughs, stop listening. If the child cries, stop remembering. I understood it then. Not fully, but enough. The crying was not just sound. It was pressure. A hand pressing into memory. The Mercer Creek search rose in me so sharply that I had to grip the edge of the desk. 3 winters ago, the call came on a Saturday night. 8-year-old female. Separated from family group during a day hike. Mercer Creek Connector Trail. Storm building. 6 of us on the initial team, spread across a 1/4-mile grid above the creek. Headlamps. Hand radios. Snow turning everything depthless. I remembered the cold first. The way it had edges. The way your body goes numb in sequence. Toes. Fingers. The place below your jaw where the scarf doesn't reach. I was working the slope north of the last sighting point. Old Douglas firs. Lower branches starting 15 feet up. Darkness underneath them so deep the headlamp only dented it. Then I heard laughter. Brief. 3 seconds. Maybe less. From the trees to my right, higher on the slope. A child laughing like she had just understood something funny in a game. I stopped, swept my headlamp toward the sound, saw only bark, snow, roots, shadow. Then I told myself it was wind, shock, cold, a strange echo from another searcher. I chose the map. I kept moving along the assigned grid. Lena was never found. Now the crying outside the station changed the memory. That is the only way I can say it. It did not show me a new thought. It changed the weight of an old one. Suddenly I remembered following the laugh. I remembered leaving the grid. I remembered pushing through branches toward a red shape beneath a root ball. I remembered a small hand reaching out of snow. I remembered a door standing upright between two fir trees. A door where no door could have been. The memory felt true. That was the terrible part. False memories do not announce themselves as false when they arrive. They arrive wearing the same clothes as real ones. I opened the field guide, focused on the lichen page. Flavelparmelia caparata, Lobaria pulmonaria, real names, real photographs, real things somebody had collected, labeled, verified. The crying continued. I read the Latin name silently until the impossible door on the Mercer Creek slope began to fade. At 12:34, the crying stopped. The silence after it felt tired, not peaceful, tired. I stood and looked through the service window. The footprints had changed direction, all of them. The small bare prints that had faced the door now faced away from it, toward the steps, toward the clearing, toward the woods. I read Gauld's next entry with the field guide still open beside me. I understand Rule 3 now. Prints facing the door mean it wants in. Prints facing the woods mean it has made you imagine letting it in. It does not need success every time. It only needs rehearsal. Rehearsal. That word made my stomach turn. I went to the old monitor mounted beside the radio. I had ignored it earlier because it looked dead. A small black and white surveillance unit connected to two exterior cameras, porch and generator shed. I flipped the switch. The screen warmed slowly, filling first with static, then a grainy image of the front porch. Empty. No child. No movement. Only snow falling through the porch light. I let out a breath. Then the monitor flickered and changed to thermal mode. I didn't know it had thermal mode. The porch showed cold blue-gray shapes. Door frame. Railing. Steps. Empty. Then a pale white figure appeared on the screen, child-sized, standing just inside the station. Behind my chair, I turned. Nothing. The room was empty. The monitor hummed. I looked back. The thermal figure remained on the screen, standing behind the empty chair. Inside. Not outside. Inside. Then it lifted one small hand and placed it on the back of my chair. The chair behind me creaked. I stepped away from it, slowly. The monitor flickered back to normal porch view. Empty snow. Empty boards. No figure. I understood something then that I had been refusing to understand. Listening had already opened something. Not the door. Not enough for it to enter fully. But enough for the station to begin making room. At 1003, the door handle moved. Not hard. Not violent. Just a slow testing turn. Left. Stop. Right. Stop. Then the child spoke so close to the door that the wood seemed thinner than it was. Ranger Ethan? I did not answer. Are you still there? I did not answer. I can hear the stove. The handle moved again. Tell me who you are, she said. Just say it so I know there's someone real in there. Rule 4. If you open the door, do not speak your name. I backed away. The room smelled suddenly of wet wool, not station wool, not my clothes, wet wool and frozen soil, the smell of Mercer Creek. Snow had appeared along the base of the door, a thin line of white dust pushed through a seal that had been tight all evening. 2 fresh pine needles lay beside it. Green. Alive. There were no live branches inside the station. The voice lowered into crying again. I waited, she said. I waited because I thought you heard me. I opened field guide. The words blurred. The crying slid under them. I was so close, she said. You were the closest one. My hand touched the back of the chair. I did not remember standing. Say your name, she whispered. Please. I forgot mine. 3 feet from the door. Then 2. My hand on the handle. A door can be a name. A door can be a memory. A door can be guilt left unlocked because you think closing it means you stopped caring. I opened the door. Only 4 inches. Just enough for the porch light to cut a narrow bar across the floor. She stood there, bare feet on frozen boards, red coat, 3 brass buttons, her head turned slightly to the right toward the tree line. Just like before. Just like Galt had written. The porch light behind her threw her shadow across the threshold. The shadow did not match her body, not in any obvious monster way. Not horns, not claws, not something cheap enough to understand quickly. It was simply too tall, too wide at the shoulders, as if something much larger stood behind the child shape and leaned down inside it. She did not turn her face fully toward me. "Do I still sound like her?" she asked. My fingers tightened on the door edge. Not, "Am I her?" Not, "Do you remember me?" Do I still sound like her? The scene showed. For 1 second, the illusion was not broken, but weakened. She was not Lena. She was something checking its work. She smiled without showing me the smile. "Dak was the first name," she said softly. "I need yours." The first syllable of my name formed in my mouth. Not because I wanted to give it, because answering your own name is one of the oldest reflexes a person has. Because a child asking who you are feels like something you should answer. Because my guilt wanted a witness. Because some part of me wanted to say, "Yes, I am Ethan Vale. I was there. I heard you. I am sorry." I looked down. The footprints around her bare feet were wrong. Not the ones leading from the steps to the door. Not the ones facing away. These prints began inside the station. They crossed the threshold outward. Small bare footprints leaving from my side of the door to hers. Something had walked out of this room before. Something had been let out. Someone had spoken a name. Maybe not Galt. Maybe before Galt. Maybe before the binder had rules. But the station remembered the direction. I stepped back. She turned her face toward me then, just for the fraction of a second before I shut the door. I want to be accurate about what I saw. It was not a monster's face. That would have been easier. It was a child's face still learning how to be a child's face. Almost right. Almost Lena. The proportions close. The mouth close. The skin close. But the eyes were still working on it. Still searching for where focus belongs. Still figuring out how much grief a human face should hold. I slammed the door and locked it. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then the knocking began. 3 taps. Even. Patient. Then silence. 3 more. Then silence. I slid down with my back against the door and sat on the floor, both hands over my mouth to keep any sound inside. The knocking continued for 20 minutes. Then the crying returned. This time I did not look at the binder. I did not look at the door. I opened the field guide to the lichen page and held the book against my knees like scripture. Flavoparmelia caparata, Lobaria pulmonaria, Usnea longissima. Real things. Real names. The crying changed shape. It became Lena. Then it became not Lena. Then it became a dozen children, overlapping softly, each one almost clear enough to follow. I heard a boy say he was under the bridge. A girl say she was in the culvert. Another say the water was rising. Another say, "Tell my dad I waited." The station seemed to fill with snowlight. The wood stove crackled too loudly. The radio clicked on. Galt's recorded voice came through, though the recorder sat dead on the desk. "Do not sort them," he whispered. "That is how it gets you to choose." The voices outside cried together. Then, one by one, they stopped. At 3:17, the clock stopped. I watched the second hand reach 12 and stay there. The generator kept running. The stove kept burning. But the forest went silent in a way I had never heard before. Not winter silence. Not storm silence. A switched-off silence, like the world outside had been unplugged. The radio clicked on. Static. Then Ortega's voice. Exact cadence. Exact cadence. Exact texture. Blackpine Ridge, District Dispatch. Emergency evacuation authorized. Please open the access door for crew entry. I did not move. Please confirm. Ranger Ethan Vale. Full name. Wrong. Open the door, Ethan Vale. We are here to help. Outside, something heavy stepped onto the porch. Not child feet. Adult weight. Boots. Slow. Deliberate. Then a man's voice spoke through the door. Vale? I knew that voice from the recorder. Galt. Don't answer dispatch, he said. It's using the official channel now. I almost answered him. Almost. That was the next trick. A warning can be bait if it sounds like rescue. Galt's voice lowered. I opened it 4 inches, he said. Same as you. I never said my name. A pause. Then he laughed once. A child's laugh. I covered my ears. The clock remained at 30:17. The radio continued. Open the door, Ethan Vale. The porch boards creaked. The child whispered from the other side. If you won't say it, someone else will. Then my own voice came through the radio. Not an imitation I could dismiss. Not close. Exact. My voice tired and low, saying, Blackpine Ridge, this is Ranger Ethan Vale requesting entry. I did not breathe. The voice repeated, Blackpine Ridge, this is Ranger Ethan Vale requesting entry. Then, softer, I'm cold. I pressed both hands flat on the desk. Wood grain. Actual. Weight of the field guide. Actual. Heat from the stove against my left side. Actual. I stayed there until the clock moved again. 30:19. Skipping the missing 2 minutes. The radio went dead. The porch creaked once. Then nothing. Morning came late. Not by much. Maybe 6 minutes. Maybe 7. But I know what dawn looks like in winter at that elevation, and I know the difference between darkness thinning naturally and darkness deciding to let go. At 6008, gray light touched the service window. At 7:14, the radio clicked on. Blackpine Ridge, morning check. How are you doing up there, Vale? Last name only. Ortega. Real Ortega. I held the transmitter for several seconds before answering. Blackpine Ridge here. I'm alive. A pause. Then Ortega said, copy that. Nothing in his voice changed. But the pause told me enough. I said, I need Harlow on the next resupply. Understood, he said. Weather window open Saturday. I set the transmitter down. Then I took the binder from the desk and opened to the first blank page after Galt's last entry. I wrote the date. I wrote my name. Ranger Ethan Vale. Blackpine Ridge Station. Then I documented everything. The footprints facing the door. The voice before midnight. The private notebook phrase. The crying and the false memory. The thermal monitor. The snow under the door. The pine needles. The door opened 4 inches. The child asking if she still sounded like Lena. The name trap. The false dispatch call. My own voice on the radio. I wrote until my fingers cramped. Then I turned back to the rule page. Below the original 4, I added a 5th rule. Rule 5. If a voice in the tree line calls itself Ranger Ethan Vale, do not answer it. I underlined it twice. Then, beneath it, smaller. It does not kill you first. It learns you. It learns your voice, your guilt, your name, and the shape of whoever you failed. If you give it permission, it will use you to reach the next person. I sat with the pen in my hand for a long time. I thought about Lena Ward. I thought about the possibility that the thing outside had found her before we did. That it had taken her laugh the way a person takes a photograph. That it had carried that sound through 3 winters waiting for someone who would recognize it. Or maybe Lena had never reached Blackpine in any way at all. Maybe she was only lost, only gone, only a little girl in a red coat who died in the cold while grown men followed grids and maps and protocols. Maybe the thing outside simply found the wound she left in me and shaped itself around it. I don't know which is worse. I don't think I'm supposed to know. The not knowing is part of the opening. It keeps the door cracked. I closed the binder and returned it to the far right of the shelf. Then I went outside. The porch boards were clean. No footprints. No red coat. No sign that anything had stood there. The snow around the steps was smooth all the way to the tree line. I looked at the forest. Nothing laughed. Nothing called my name. The resupply came 2 days later. Harlow arrived with the crew. She asked about generator output, trail closure logs, radial consistency, fuel consumption. Normal questions. Professional questions. The kind of questions people ask when they already know not to ask the real one in front of others. Before she left, she stood beside the desk and looked at the binder. "You added to it?" she said. "Yes." "Good," she said. "That's what it's for." I wanted to ask how many people had added rules. I wanted to ask whether Golt was alive. I wanted to ask whether Lena Ward had ever been connected to Blackpine before I arrived, or whether I had brought her there by remembering her too loudly. But Harlow was already putting on her gloves. At the door, she stopped. "Vale," she said. I looked up. "If you hear something that sounds like someone you failed, don't assume the failure is asking to be fixed." Then she stepped outside and closed the door behind her. I served the remaining 19 days of my posting. The laughter came back 3 more nights. The crying came back twice. Each time I opened the field guide to the Lichen page. Each time I held onto real names for real things until the memories stopped trying to rearrange themselves. I did not open the door again. I did not answer a child's voice. I did not speak my name after midnight. When spring transition came, they closed Blackpine for repairs that did not appear on any public maintenance schedule. I drove down the service road with the heater on and both hands tight on the wheel. For the first mile, nothing happened. For the second, the radial hissed twice and died. On the 3rd mile, just before the road curved down toward the lower valley, I heard a child laugh from the trees. I did not stop. I kept driving. Then my own voice called from somewhere behind the truck. "Blackpine Ridge, this is Ranger Ethan Vale requesting entry." I kept driving. The voice called again, closer this time. Not frightened, not angry, relieved. That was the part that stayed with me. Not that it sounded like me. The worst part was that it sounded relieved.